Okay, so for this week, I thought about what we should talk about, and what I came to a conclusion is a question that one of my clients have asked me before. And one thing was during the whole process from the very beginning, he said this. He said, "What would you do if this was you buying?" And that was a pretty good question. Why? Because I see things differently now from before my career till now that completely changed my perspective. And it started making me think of what I would pay attention to if I were buying my own home today. And and if I were buying a home today, here's a few things I care about more than most people expect. So right off the bat, I'm gonna say this isn't about trying to time the market perfectly to get into the the market and start buying. It isn't about finding the perfect deal. It's about how I would, feel after the decision of picking this home and seeing it over the years. And what I mean by that is, again, this isn't about trying to figure out the investment part of the property, and more so how it would feel to wake up in this house and live in it day to day, and how it would all play out during any time of the week. And what I mean by that is feeling comfortable and feeling satisfied and at peace of where I'm living at. And one thing is an example, right? For all the active duty military members and all the veterans, you've known the schedule, the work schedule. The within the work schedule, that it beats you from early mornings to no lunches, no chow, and to late nights. And guess what? Once all that's done, you have to go home and get some rest. And when you go home after dealing with that whole day, with all of the people you're dealing at work, with everything that was brought up, the one thing you want to do is get home, park, and go to sleep, right? Now, how would you feel if you get at home after a long day and you're having another battle, which is trying to just find parking? That would drive me insane. So that's one thing. One thing is the parking. Can I come home, look for parking, and it not take me 30 minutes to find parking before I can get home? I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but it's a pretty big challenge. That now looking at what I know now and going shopping with all these buyers, it looks great online. Beautiful pictures, good location, good price, but then the neighborhood is packed with cars and you can't find a single parking spot. You have to go in loops and loops and loops and find parking. If you can put up with that, then that's what. And if you can, out of the price, location, and everything else, but it's the parking and you can live with that, then why not? But that's just for me. I want to get home from any time of the day, during the weekday, during the weekend, and just go straight to a parking spot and be able to get off and go straight to my house. And now two is back to the same scenario, but instead of trying to look for parking, is trying to find quiet time. I personally like a quiet neighborhood. Some people like, a busy neighborhood, depending where depending on your upbringing, depending how you were raised. Some people like having a lot of noise in the background, people having parties, people, driving by. When it's festive, a lot of people are out and about, and some people like quiet. If anybody just talks in the streets, you can hear them from down the road. I'm a little bit in between, but for the most part, I like more of a quiet neighborhood. And how quiet is it with the neighbors, with the traffic, with the community? That's another thing. And I actually have a good example because this came up with one of my buyers where I just explained it. I don't like a lot of noise. I don't want to be near a main street. I want to be kind of not in a cul-de-sac, but not near the streets, somewhere in the middle where I'm close but not too close, where that noise doesn't affect me and I can't hear it. And one of my buyers, when we were home shopping, they were right next to a freeway. It had a great view. It looks nice, I'm not gonna lie. But as soon as you open the doors or open the windows or went to the backyard, you can hear all those cars driving by. I personally wouldn't like it, but they thought it was great. And that's going back to it's everybody's preferences. So if you can deal with that, then that's fine. And look, I have a great example right now of this property right here. So I just went on Zillow. I looked at it really quick. The pricing's not bad. It's a condo. There's a price cut. Let's look at the pictures. I don't want to work, but just glancing at this looks nice. Move-in ready. Not bad. You know, the cabinets aren't the new ones that are out there, but this is nice. Really clean property. And then you started wondering why. And you, other than digging through this stuff, you also see that it's been on the market for 158 days. So if it looks that good and there's been showings and people have been going to it, the one thing that they didn't expect because they saw this and it was a great deal, price cut, nice, move-in ready, was when they probably pulled up, it was what I said was that they didn't like the neighborhood. So I just plugged this in really quick and look, that's where it's at. And look what's right next to it. It's a highway. Personally, I don't think the 76 is too loud or too packed, other than it's when people are going or leaving to work. But for the most part, I'd say that's the only times it gets loud. But even then, let's just imagine this was like the 5, the 15, the 805, whatever. That just showed you if you were going home shopping, you want to go see this after you saw these great things online, that everything would have changed once you got there. So that's one of the small things that I do look into now, and hopefully that can help you too. Maybe zoom out a little bit and you'll see that. And these are the things that don't show up online. They just matter once you live there, and they can take a toll, you know, like every day you have to find parking, every day it's so loud. You're backed up to a freeway, a main busy street. You know, it's impossible to park, impossible to sleep. The traffic, you know, mostly whenever they say something about, hey, look, there's a lot of foot traffic in this. Well, there's just this, a lot of traffic coming by where you just people are constantly going, constantly going, constantly going. So that's one thing. And that's what I mean, that a lot of homes look great online, but not every home lives well. So another thing, I I don't have an example, but what I can do is explain. So just like that one property, there is, you know, they staged it really well. It's clean. It looks brand new. Good location. Like just you say it was a good location, not next to a freeway, not next to a busy street, everything just lines up. But once you got there, the layout was kind of funky, right? So I know that I've seen some properties where I've taken some clients that was a complete, you know, turn off. As soon as they try to figure this out, or as soon as they notice this, they didn't like it. We moved on, and it's not being a functional property. And what I mean by that is, for example, just a condo, just from the top of my head, a condo. For a condo, there's two properties, right? Here's the entrance. Here's the other side of the entrance, and they're conjoined. So they're the condos is one, and they're back to back. They have a common wall, but they have to go. One of the owners has to go through the very back, the ones that we were looking for sale, and go around. And on the very back, that's the entrance. It was kind of like hidden. So the functionality, that's one thing. They just didn't like it. They had to park all the way over here in front, and they had to go in front of the neighbors and go all the way to the very back and try to get inside just to, you know, go inside their own place. What else? Another one was there's this property, and this one's San Diego. In San Diego, the properties aren't, I would say, bad, but it is what it is for San Diego. And for San Diego, they're pretty much pushed in together where they take advantage of every square footage in certain neighborhoods. And with this one, the front of the house, there was no room for parking, no public street parking. The parking situation was that there's a alleyway in the very back, and in the back, that's where you have to come in to park. So you're pretty much parking in your backyard. And whenever you're trying to pull up to a property like that and you send people your directions, you're going towards the front of the house, but there's no parking. You have to go all the way around and then go to the very back alleyways and park. Same thing. Another client did that. They couldn't figure it out. They didn't like it and moved on. So the functionality also plays a big part on top of the other things that I said. And that's one thing I look at now. Just want something to be functional, something simple where you can just go right in. And then now with that, payments. So for those that got lucky the last couple of years, you know, 2019, 2020, 2021, when the rates were lower, they had a smaller payment compared to all the people now in 2026. They're a little bit higher. They're not as high as they used to be when it was 7, 8%. Now we're in the 6% range, give or take, on the day. But back then, a payment would have been in the, 2500s to 3000s. Now, that same house with the interest rates and the price adjusting, that house can go for $5,000 a month. So even though they're the same houses and everything, I would also consider the payments now, just because it's a different game from what it was a couple years ago to what it is now. And it's always good to be liquid in cash. You can still, and I've said this in another video, pay attention to the payments now. Make sure that you're comfortable with it. If you can make it, then you can make it. But if not, and you want to be a little bit conservative and make sure that you have extra funds just in case anything, then don't push yourself. Don't spread it too thin where you're maximizing that purchase price for that mortgage payment, because taxes, insurance, the PITI that I mentioned before is there, and that's not counting the HOA. So on top of that, it starts adding up. So that's another thing I would see. A payment feels, I want a payment that I don't feel tight every month where I feel like any mistake can just break that straw. So that's another thing, and especially now in today's market. And then lastly, I would think about this property, lastly, as an investment piece. So after, because you're buying this home to live in it, you do have a long-term idea of what it's gonna, what's your exit strategy if you're gonna sell it, rent it out, upsize, whatever. But personally, I would think about it as this is where I'm gonna live at. This is where I'm gonna be coming home every night. Let me deal with, I want the, parking, the noise to be good. I also want to make sure that the house is functional, and I want to make sure that I have good payment, because within a year to 2 years or however many years before you decide to move and try to do something different, I want to be at peace where I'm at. And with that, I will now then start thinking about the exit strategy, which is, so if I decide to move in 2 years, how flexible is this house? Or how flexible is this house where I can rent it out? Not because I'm planning to move tomorrow, but because life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes you thought you're gonna, this is gonna be a forever home. Sometimes you think, hey, this is a house where I'm only gonna live in for a couple years and rent it out. So I would always still also just, after I have that peace of mind, have this on my last, checklist of what I would look at now if I were buying a home is, will this house be able to rent out and cash flow me some, maybe a couple $100? I know within a couple of years I can start raising the rent and this could be my rental. But in the meantime, I don't want to be in the negative. Sometimes you have to be in the negative, but for the most part, just have a plan where you know where you're getting into if a couple of years pass by and you rent it. And then if you do sell it, well, how fast can you sell it? Is another thing. So if you've already kind of looked at the few things that I mentioned earlier, then it should be pretty quick. Not saying it should sell within the next day when you put it in the market, but it should be quicker than most properties like the one that I showed you where they're backed up against the freeway. And even though it's been on even though it's great, it looks nice, it's pretty, it's not bad, it's in a good city, just bad location in the city, it stays longer, 100 and something days. Are you trying to sell that and you're okay with 100 plus days in the market, or do you want to sell right away? So that's what I would consider towards, the last thing of what I would do is how flexible is this house to all those options. I don't want to close personally. I don't want to close any door for me. I want to have all these options available. Is I'll be able to rent it out. How does it look like? How flexible? How easy is that for me to rent it out? How easy it is and how quick is it for me to sell it? And it's just good. It's always good to have your contingency plan. But going back to all that, these aren't checking the boxes saying it needs to meet all this. It's just what I would look at. And I want to say that you're never going to find the perfect home. As long as it's 80% perfect, you can deal with the 20. The busy streets, the older systems, the smaller yard, the HOA rules. The house does not need to be perfect as long as it's acceptable long term and you know what you're accepting. You know what you can deal with your trade-offs, you just have to be honest with yourself with what are you good with compromising. And compromising, some people think it's a bad word, but I don't think so. In the context of this, if you live in an HOA property, yes, one part of that is going to be your mortgage payment plus the HOA, and the HOA can increase annually. But with that, HOA is not all bad. Why? because it keeps the neighborhood all uniform and make sure that everybody's house is nice, clean, no, no crazy yard is with overgrown, grass. It's not falling apart. There's easy parking spots. Like there's a fine for some people or some HOAs if they have, one house and one family bring in like eight cars, then they start finding some people, which is good if you want to find parking and be able to park. Then there's quiet hours, you know, uh, and that's just a trade-off. You're gonna pay the extra 300, 400, $500 for the HOA, but you're gonna be coming home to something that it's fits your lifestyle and what you want to do. Same with the other things, you got approved for a certain price point. You're only looking at a specific city. You want you don't want a condo. You want a single family home. It's not bad to know what you want, but with the market, with what's going on, with the location that you're picking, all that adds up. You're gonna start noticing that there's only a few things that you might like on the market. So it goes back to saying it's not gonna be the perfect, you're not gonna find the perfect home that's gonna check off all the boxes. And if it does, then it does. But if it doesn't, then just know, make sure that at least 80% is good, and then you'll deal with the later 20%. And one thing to notice is whenever you're doing a showing, just take a second, pause, and see how you're feeling after you leave it. Because that's going to tell you a lot. It's going to tell you if it was, driving up your anxiety, that means it's going to be off. If you live there for a couple of years, what does that mean? If you feel calm, relief, at peace, that means, whoa, that's a pretty good neighborhood. If you feel excited, not pressured in that neighborhood, it's calm, then that's another, good sign. So pay attention to that whenever you're going to showings. That ultimately is telling you and showing you just how that energy that you're gonna have when you're living there. And then again, every buyer gets excited because they get pre-approved and they have that, they have that credit card, they have those funds readily available, but don't use it all because once you become a homeowner, some things also start showing up later with some repairs, some upgrades, some things, and you don't want to stretch yourself out too thin where you don't even have those sufficient funds. So again, it's just what you're comfortable with. And also, don't let that noise get to you with what your friends are saying, family are saying, people online, headlines. Look at what you are doing. Pay attention, be aware of those, but don't let them decide what you're gonna deal with because this is gonna be your house, your property. That's where you're gonna be living in, and you never know how long you're gonna live in. You just have to follow your gut, listen to what's going on, but don't let that noise affect you. And for me, I'll do my best to tell you, well, actually, I do this. I do always do this with every showing, every client. Whenever they want a certain property, I let them know, like, hey, here's this. If I see a red flag right away, I let them know, but I don't tell them, let's not go see it. I say, yeah, we can go see it just so you can get a feel for it and see how you like it. And same thing with some of the examples I gave you. There was no parking in some of them, and that was a complete turn off. And then also they're backed up against a main road, not a freeway, but a main road, and they didn't realize how much of a difference that would make. And I know I was upfront with it, very transparent, saying personally, if that was me, I wouldn't. If you're okay with it, then that's fine because just again another client liked the house that was right next to the freeway because they liked the moving traffic. They looked pretty. It was on a slight hill, but you can see the freeway and all the cars. You just never know. I'm here to let you know and recommend things that I see that has, not worked out for some buyers, but that doesn't mean that it's not gonna work out for you. So it's ultimately your decisions. And what I am saying is everybody you hear from, everybody that you or everything you read online, take it with as as a small piece, but don't let that small piece deviate you from your decision. But if I were buying today, I wouldn't try to outsmart the market. I wouldn't try to focus on buying, a property and sorry, I just wouldn't overthink it and first think about peace of mind. I would focus on buying something that fits my life, my tolerance, the flexibility that would come in the future, and something that would hold up over time that I would be happy with.